especially in the era of a globalized economy, corporations will seek out shadowy, underregulated labor markets because they're cheaper. And where do you often find things like child labor and slavery and cheap labor in the poor parts of the world? And that's why so much of our stuff is made over there.
One of the things that was highlighted during the pandemic was how dependent we are on things that come from other countries. And there has been some discussion about constructing things in America and building things in America and having things made here under conditions that are controlled by our labor rules and the ethics and morals that we operate under. But it seems like we don't have the raw components. So even if that's the case, just the raw components, like if they decided to manufacture all of the cell phones that Apple makes, if they said, look, we have to come to grips with the fact that it's inhumane, the conditions these people work under in these plants where they build the phones. We are now going to do this all in America, all with unionized labor where they're paid very well and they have benefits. Still, you have to deal with the raw components.
That's right. That's exactly right.
There's no way around it.
There's no way around it. And why does Apple not do that?
Well, Apple is one of the richest companies that's ever existed, which is insane when you think about the profit. Literally all comes... It's all batteries. And everything they make has batteries.
Everything.
Everything.
Every last piece of everything has cobalt in that battery. And they all have rechargeable batteries, right? And they make money hand over fist. More money than anyone, any company, maybe ever.
And the companies all
and yet
have at their forefront social justice and ethics and morals.
Read their press statements.
Yeah.
Read their press statements. They every quarterly statement, every 10K, we're proud to uphold human rights standards throughout our supply chain. They all say always down to the mining level. Because they know in the back of their head there's people who know the truth. So they put it out there, and all of our suppliers participate in audits, that there's no forced labor, no child labor, and so on. So they all say that. And so what would happen if Apple, and we not just to pick on them, but of course they're the big elephant in this conversation, the biggest of them all. So what would happen if they just shifted all their manufacturing here?
Well, they are shifting their manufacturing at least somewhat away from China because of
the supply chain risks.
Yes, and all the problems they're having at the facilities themselves, where they're having riots, and protests, and shutting down production, and so they're realizing that that's an issue.
That's right.
But that's just economics.
That's economic. So, and a lot of that shifted to India, which still has a lower wage labor market. So, but why isn't it all built here?
Right. Why isn't it?
They're here.
Right. And
why isn't it all? Why isn't
immense
it all
profits?
It's because of the profit.
Right.
You'd actually have to pay people here.
But they have, and is it also part of the problem that corporations have to exist on the structure of constantly increasing revenue every year?
And shareholder value.
Yes.
Shareholder value. Everything comes down to shareholder value, right? That's what drives their stock price. That's what drives their market cap. It's shareholder value. And what's that? That's your profits divided by the number of shares outstanding, right? Roughly speaking.
Yeah.
And what's profits? Well, it's revenues minus costs. Oh, costs. Labor. And so we're back to that same thing. And so, okay, we can pay people in America, $25 an hour plus benefits and a 401k and time off and all of this business, or we can pay the people over there $3 an hour and no 401k, and right. So that's what drives. But as you rightfully noted, what about the raw materials? Because there's not enough of that here, there, or anywhere else. A lot of that is in sub-Saharan Africa, in the Southern Hemisphere. And so you'd still have to get cobalt and other things out of Africa. And so what I'm saying is that's their chain. You see, the blood for cobalt economy only exists because Apple, Samsung, Tesla, all the legacy car makers, all the tech companies, they have demand for cobalt. And that creates this value chain. And the bottom of the value chain is the blood and misery we're talking about. So it only exists because of their demand for it. So aren't they responsible to fix the problem?
It seems like they absolutely should be.
It seems like it. And yet none of them are accepting adequate responsibility.
And do you think that part of that is because of what we talked about before with profits and the obligation they have to their shareholders to do something like this would require just a fundamental change in the way they operate? The only thing that I could think of that would somehow or another shift this is some sort of a technological innovation that allowed them to create batteries with some new technology.
So, okay, it's a couple of important things here. I don't think it would cost all that much for them to solve this problem very quickly.
Have you run numbers?
I mean, let's look at what's the source of the harm. Okay, it's peasants and kids digging in unsafe conditions for $1 or $2 a day, suffering injury, toxic contamination, and death. So, how do we address those harms? What's the low-hanging fruit? All right, PPE, gloves, hard hats, masks, goggles, whatever. How much can that possibly cost? A decent wage so that parents don't have to bring their kids in to work just to survive. All right, instead of $1 or $2 a day, people in that part of the world can probably reasonably survive on $10 a day. A day, not an hour, a day. That's not going to add up to too much. Then you don't have artisanal tunnel digging. Let the excavators do it. Use proper heavy equipment. Well, there's equipment down there. If they need a little more, how much could that really cost? And you go down the list of these things that would help solve a lot of the harms, and then you add in a few things like invest in the local community that we avail of, like build some schools, some public health clinics, and so on. It's not going to add up to that much. I mean, it would probably add up to what a company like Apple makes in a day.